The CIA once hired psychics to spy on enemies. That's not a theory, it's a fact. For over 20 years, the U.S. government poured millions into training people to read minds, see across time, and locate hidden nuclear weapons using nothing but thought. It sounds insane. It was real. Buried under decades of secrecy, Project Stargate wasn't just weird, it shook the foundations of what we believe is humanly possible. This isn't science fiction. This is classified history they hoped you'd never discover. It all started with fear, not fear of ghosts or the unknown, but fear of the Soviet Union. In the early 1970s, American intelligence agencies were stunned when reports emerged that the USSR was investing heavily in something truly bizarre: psychic warfare. According to various classified documents and defectors' testimonies, the Soviets were training psychics, or remote viewers, to perform military tasks with their minds alone. They were allegedly attempting to harness telepathy, telekinesis, and mind control as weapons of war. To the CIA, this wasn't just laughable, it was terrifying. If the Soviets believed in this enough to fund it, then the U.S. couldn't afford to ignore it. That's when the American government decided to launch its own secret program, one that would quietly evolve into Project Stargate. The operation began at the Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, in Menlo Park, California. Physicists Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff were contracted by the CIA to explore remote viewing, a phenomenon where a person could supposedly see a place, person, or object that was hidden from them, often thousands of miles away. Targ and Puthoff weren't typical paranormal enthusiasts. They were respected scientists, and the CIA wasn't exactly in the business of crystal balls. But paranoia, especially Cold War paranoia, changes everything. At SRI, the first experiments were simple. A psychic subject would sit in a sealed room while a target person traveled to a random location. The psychic would then attempt to see and describe the location. At first, the results were inconsistent, vague, and often laughable. But then came someone who would change everything: a former police officer and artist named Ingo Swann. Swann claimed he could not only see hidden locations, but also travel outside his body and visit places in real time. He described details of buildings, terrain, and even objects inside locked safes. When tested under controlled conditions, some of his results were so accurate that even hardened skeptics inside the CIA began to pay attention. Swann was able to describe weather patterns, geographical features, and even secret military installations that were later confirmed. His work convinced Targ, Puthoff, and others that remote viewing wasn't just imagination, it might be a legitimate phenomenon worth exploring. Soon the program grew. The U.S. Army became involved, and the effort was given a series of code names over the years: Grill Flame, Center Lane, Sunstreak. But the most enduring name was Stargate. It operated quietly, funded through black budgets and buried within layers of bureaucracy. Dozens of military personnel, civilians, and even natural psychics were recruited and trained in remote viewing. One of the most famous viewers was Joe McMoneagle, who received the Legion of Merit for his work and claimed to have located missing persons, enemy submarines, and even underground bunkers using only his mind. One notable case involved a remote viewing session aimed at identifying the location of a downed Soviet bomber. The viewer, given only a vague coordinate, allegedly described the surrounding landscape, terrain, and even nearby structures with such clarity that the military was able to locate the wreckage. Another case involved the viewer describing a secret Soviet weapons facility, later confirmed by satellite imagery. The intelligence community was divided. Some were astonished, others deeply skeptical. But the results kept coming. Despite internal doubts, Stargate was producing something that normal intel couldn't. Traditional spies risked their lives to infiltrate foreign governments. Satellites cost millions to launch and operate. Remote viewing, by comparison, was cheap, and when it worked, shockingly effective. The project continued through the 1980s with mixed but often promising results. Some sessions were complete misses, with psychics describing nonsense. Others yielded hits that analysts couldn't explain. The CIA never openly admitted that the program was flawless, but they didn't shut it down either. As the Cold War wound down, so did the government's patience. Budget cuts, public pressure, and the rise of digital surveillance made Stargate seem outdated. In 1995, the CIA officially declassified the program and handed over evaluation to the American Institutes for Research, or AIR. Their final report was damning. It concluded that while there were some statistical anomalies, the data was not reliable enough for actionable intelligence. The program was shut down. Case closed. Or so they said. But documents tell a more complicated story. Internal memos reveal that some officials within the CIA and Department of Defense continued to believe that remote viewing held real promise. In fact, several former Stargate viewers continued working privately with law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Joe McMoneagle, for instance, was said to have assisted in locating missing persons even after the program's demise. Other psychics went underground, offering services to private clients, corporations, and yes, even other governments. The end of Stargate didn't mean the end of psychic espionage. If anything, it just moved further into the shadows. Critics say the whole thing was a waste of money fueled by Cold War hysteria and bad science. But believers argue that the truth is more unsettling. The mind, under the right conditions, might be capable of more than we understand. Even now, remote viewing is studied in fringe circles, secret labs, and classified corners of global intelligence. Some say it never stopped. Some say it works. Others say it's the most dangerous tool ever discovered, and we still don't know how to control it. And that's where the mystery deepens. Because for all its controversy, Stargate left behind a massive archive of data. Thousands of remote viewing sessions, evaluations, and field reports. And buried inside them are glimpses of things no satellite or spy plane could ever capture. Visions of distant worlds, ancient civilizations, secrets locked deep beneath Earth's surface. What if some of it was true? What if they saw things they were never supposed to see? The deeper you go into the Stargate archives, the stranger it gets. What began as a Cold War intelligence experiment soon drifted into realms no one expected. Dimensions of thought, glimpses of alternate realities, and inexplicable visions that even hardened analysts struggled to categorize. These were not just intelligence-gathering exercises. In many cases, the remote viewers reported seeing things that had no direct military or strategic value, but were so bizarre, so specific, and so consistent across different viewers that they couldn't simply be dismissed as imagination or coincidence. Patterns began to emerge. Images of unknown symbols, non-human entities, underground structures not marked on any map. Viewers described locations on Earth, but also beyond Earth, on the Moon, on Mars, and even in distant galaxies. Many of these descriptions aligned with ancient myths, religious texts, and other viewers' reports, even when conducted in isolation. Ingo Swann, one of the program's original psychics, claimed to have remote-viewed the dark side of the Moon.
In his session notes, many of which were later declassified, he described artificial structures, strange lights, and humanoid beings operating what appeared to be machinery. These claims would have been dismissed entirely if not for corroborating descriptions from other viewers, including those who had no contact with Swan. One viewer reported seeing tall, thin figures inside glass structures buried in lunar rock. Another described what looked like a mining operation near a crater. These were not one-off delusions. They were recorded during controlled viewing sessions, often without any leading cues or hints about the target. The program's supervisors were split. Some dismissed these as mental noise or subconscious projections, while others quietly filed the data away for further review. After all, if even 1% of it was true, the implications were staggering. Then came Mars. In one now infamous session, a viewer was asked to describe a target location provided only by a set of coordinates. They had no idea what they were looking at or why. As they focused, the viewer began to describe tall, triangular structures rising from a barren, red landscape. They spoke of thin air, a dying civilization, and beings who were aware of their presence. When the coordinates were later revealed, they matched a specific location on Mars. The transcript from that session reads like science fiction, but again the viewer was blind to the target. What's more unsettling is that other viewers, in different sessions, gave similar descriptions when viewing Mars. They saw large domes, underground tunnels, and what they believed to be a remnant of intelligent life. These reports were never officially acted upon by the CIA, but they were documented, archived, and eventually released under the Freedom of Information Act. And to this day, no one has fully explained how multiple viewers, separated by time and distance, described the same alien landscapes. The scientific community, when exposed to the declassified materials, reacted with disbelief and scorn. Mainstream scientists called the program pseudoscience, pointing to the lack of reproducible results and the subjective nature of the data. But within military and intelligence circles, the story was more complex. Some viewed the program as a necessary gamble, a cheap investment in case it worked. Others saw it as a threat to the credibility of U.S. intelligence, a black mark fueled by desperation during the Cold War. But those who worked inside Stargate, especially the viewers themselves, had a different perspective. Many of them believed deeply and unshakably that what they saw was real. Not metaphorically real, not symbolically real, but physically, tangibly real. One such believer was Mel Riley, an Army intelligence officer turned remote viewer. Riley worked on several missions, including some involving Soviet targets and suspected terrorist activity. But he also participated in sessions that veered into what he called archetypal dimensions, realms that seemed to exist outside linear time, where he encountered not just locations, but intelligences. He claimed that some of these intelligences were aware of his presence, even reacting to him during sessions. In one chilling account, Riley described viewing an underground facility in which he felt he was being watched. The sensation was so intense he had to stop the session. He later learned that another viewer described the same location and experienced the same sense of being observed. Were these hallucinations? Shared delusions? Or was something else happening? Something we still don't understand about consciousness and perception. Stargate raised more questions than it answered. Some researchers speculated that remote viewing might tap into a quantum field of information, a non-local awareness beyond space and time. Others leaned toward Jungian theories of a collective unconscious, a shared psychic reservoir that connects all minds. The CIA, for its part, avoided metaphysical speculation. They wanted results. And while many sessions were discarded due to ambiguity or inconsistency, the undeniable truth is that some results were stunningly accurate. Descriptions of targets, coordinates, and events that no one could explain. Not with logic, not with science, not with chance. Despite its ultimate shutdown in 1995, the legacy of Stargate didn't die. In fact, after the program was declassified, interest surged. Civilian researchers, paranormal investigators, and conspiracy theorists pounced on the released documents. Books were written, interviews were given. Former viewers like McMoneagle and Swan became minor celebrities in fringe science communities. Remote viewing training courses began popping up online, and perhaps most curiously, reports emerged that other nations, Russia, China, even North Korea, were exploring similar psychic programs. Whether they succeeded or not remains unknown. But one thing is clear. The idea that human consciousness might extend beyond the physical body, that it could access information across time and space, is no longer just fantasy. It's been tested, funded, and pursued by one of the most secretive intelligence agencies on Earth. They may have shut down the official program, but the question still echoes through classified corridors and private think tanks. What if it works? What if we only scratched the surface? What if remote viewing is just the beginning of something much bigger? Ingo Swann once said that reality is not only stranger than we suppose, it's stranger than we can suppose. And as we peel back the layers of Project Stargate, we find a story not just about spying or war, but about the hidden potential of the human mind and the deep, dark secrets governments are willing to chase, no matter how unbelievable they seem. Because when truth becomes stranger than fiction, it's no longer a question of belief. It's a question of control. And maybe that's why they shut it down. Or maybe they never really did.
In the years following the declassification of Project Stargate, the world seemed to quickly forget that one of the most powerful intelligence agencies on Earth had spent 2 decades trying to weaponize the human mind. The headlines faded, the controversy passed. The skeptics dismissed it as a Cold War oddity, an embarrassing relic of a more desperate time. But beneath the surface, the echoes of the program remained, resonating through obscure scientific papers, whispers among former intelligence officers, and curious patterns in modern defense spending. Some say the program simply changed names, was moved to a more secure facility, buried under deeper levels of classification. Others say the entire field of psychic research was outsourced, privatized, and absorbed into black-budget operations that no longer needed to answer to Congress or the public. What we do know is that the story didn't end in 1995. In the years since, former participants of Project Stargate have continued to speak out,
not with wild theories or self-aggrandizing tales, but with calm, consistent recollections of what they experienced. Joseph McMonagle, one of the most highly regarded viewers in the program, gave detailed accounts of remote viewing sessions that produced actionable intelligence. He stood by his work, even under the scrutiny of journalists, academics, and government officials. He claimed to have seen events days before they happened, to have described enemy installations in exact detail, and even viewed distant moments in human history, past and future. When asked if he believed the program was truly over, he simply said, "I doubt it." And then there are the strange coincidences. In the early 2000s, several U.S. military documents were released referencing non-local perception, enhanced cognition, and consciousness-based operational strategies. The wording was deliberately vague, but the implications were familiar. Rumors swirled of elite units receiving cognitive training, of experimental labs working on brain-computer interfaces that tapped into something more than just neurons and data. Private defense contractors with close ties to intelligence agencies began investing in research that sounded eerily like a continuation of Stargate, only now cloaked in the language of neuroscience and AI. The technology had changed, but the goal remained: to harness the untapped potential of the human mind for strategic advantage. But what if this was never just about warfare or espionage? What if the true purpose of Project Stargate was not to spy on the Soviets or locate missiles, but to understand something far more profound? As remote viewers ventured deeper into the unknown, they began reporting experiences that defied traditional physics. They spoke of collective consciousness, of timelines shifting, of seeing possible futures that depended on human decisions. Some described encounters with what they believed were non-human intelligences, beings that existed outside of linear time, that observed humanity with curiosity or perhaps concern. These weren't hallucinations, they weren't dreams. They were experienced by multiple people under controlled conditions, repeated with eerie consistency, and documented in government files. To skeptics, this sounds like fantasy. To believers, it's confirmation. But to the CIA, it was data. Strange, unsettling data that couldn't be easily dismissed or easily explained. And perhaps that's what made it dangerous. Not because of what the viewers saw, but because of what their visions implied. That reality might be far more fluid, far more interconnected than we ever imagined. That thought itself might be a tool of exploration and possibly manipulation. That the mind could reach across time and space, not metaphorically, but literally. And if that's true, it doesn't just change warfare, it changes everything. Imagine governments with the ability to see enemy plans before they happen, to influence outcomes through focused intention, to extract secrets from the minds of rivals. The ethical implications are staggering, the strategic possibilities are limitless, and the risks, both moral and existential, are enormous. It's no wonder that if Stargate or something like it continues to exist, it would remain buried in the deepest levels of secrecy. Because the moment we accept that the human mind is capable of accessing hidden dimensions of reality, we also accept that our world is no longer private, no longer fixed, no longer under control. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the real revelation of Project Stargate was not that psychics can spy or that thoughts can travel, but that reality itself is participatory, that consciousness shapes what we see, what we find, and what we believe is possible, that human perception isn't a passive observer, but an active force in the universe. This idea terrifies traditional science. It undermines centuries of materialist assumptions, but it excites those who dare to look deeper. Because if the CIA believed it, if they spent millions chasing it, then maybe there's something there after all. So what now? Today, thousands of people around the world are learning remote viewing, not as a joke, not as entertainment, but as a skill. Civilian projects, independent researchers, and former government operatives are sharing techniques once locked behind classified doors. And while the mainstream continues to mock or ignore it, there are quiet movements growing. Communities that believe we've only scratched the surface of what the human mind can do. They believe Project Stargate was just the beginning, that the future of intelligence isn't in satellites or drones, but in consciousness itself. And if they're right, then we're on the edge of a new era, one where wars may be fought not with bullets or bombs, but with focused thought and hidden perception. An era where truth is no longer what you're told, but what you see, in your mind, across the vast distances, outside of time. A world where secrecy is impossible, because everything is visible to those who know how to look. Maybe that's why they tried to shut it down. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they just moved it further out of reach, deeper underground, beyond FOIA requests and congressional hearings. Because the biggest secret isn't what Project Stargate saw. The biggest secret is that it worked. And now that you know, the only question that remains is this: what are they seeing now? And what might you be capable of if you dared to look?